Hello, and welcome to my first real installment of Isaiah 118 Apologetics, where we scour the internet, try to respond to people who are talking about Christianity, they're talking about God in general. And today, actually, a couple days ago, I was watching David Wood's live stream where he's going over the biggest fails of Dawa in January. And apparently Jake, the metaphysician, decided to hop on to throw his 2 cents in, and the whole thing got derailed, and it turned into like a 7-8 hour live stream. And then I heard this part by Jake, and I thought it was absurdly stupid, but I also thought it was funny how I know that none of the other three, like, this wasn't really the topic of the conversation. It just went this way, and so they weren't going to raise the defeaters to what he's saying. But allow me. So, David Wood's podcast, Jake Brancatella. All right.
And then also, you could also take the other view where there's a infinite series or regress of moments, and God is always related to individual creatures.
Okay, so which view do you think then you would be most sympathetic to amongst those two?
Well, I think there
Like in
are
a
other
quality view,
factors.
what would fit best, do you think?
I think there are other factors related to this question, but I prefer the second view.
Okay, like eternal regression of moments. So you would say that there's like this kind of infinite regression of moments prior to there being creatures in the
My,
life of.
my position is that God has always been creating one thing after another, and that there was not a first thing created, so to speak. That's my personal position.
Wait, okay, so like how does that relate to the Quran and the descriptions of creation in the Quran?
Like what, for example?
Well, I just thought that, I don't know, there was like a point where the heavens were made and the earth and then,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
the
yeah.
waters.
Sure. So the view is that every particular thing that's created has a beginning in time, but the regress or the sort of abstraction of creation, it doesn't. There's not a first thing created in that sense. It just goes back and back and back and back. God's been creating one thing after another.
All right. So, hopefully, you guys can start to see where my issue is. He goes on to talk about this is not his view, it is historical, which it is. Ibn Tamir died roughly 1328. He's the one who proposed a complex theological model suggesting that God has always been creating, often articulated as the concept of perpetual creativity, where temporal acts are having no beginning. Perpetual action, Ibn Taymiyyah maintained that God's perfection entails that he has always been creating, speaking, acting according to his will. Kind of like what Jake was talking about here. Sorry. He did not believe in successive creation. That is, this specific universe is that it's eternal. Rather, he held that this universe has a beginning and an end, but it was was preceded by another universe, and it will be followed by another universe in an ongoing, perpetual process. There's been an infinite amount of creations in the past. There will be an infinite amount of creations in the future. So yeah, so we could see here he was clearly going against the Kalamists, the those who believe that God created ex nihilo, and I think he's wrong here. I think I'm just going to read what I have written, and we're going to see how it goes. All right. So, this idea that God has always been creating, this leads to a problem known as the absurdity of an infinite. Oh, sorry. Let me get this correct. This leads to a problem known as the absurdity of the sequential formulation of an actual infinite. If we don't have a first cause or an end cause in an infinite chain of X, in a perpetual process into the past, the present moment or act would never come to be acted because you would always have another moment or act before it that must transpire. This is like if the present moment was on a timeline was 0, where the future is positive numbers and the past is negative numbers. To get to the present moment, you would have to go through each negative number before you could reach the present moment at 0. But if you were going through one act or moment perpetually or sequentially, one after another, you will always have another act or moment to go through before reaching the one you are at now, 0. So you can't get to the present moment if you're going one after another. You can never get to 0 because infinite numbers don't end. Like negative numbers don't end, just as positive numbers don't end. Yeah. This is not just a problem with Jake or Ibn Tamir's view, but also with other religions, or should I say cults, such as Mormonism, where it is said, quote, not quote, I'm saying this off what I remember, as man is, God once was, as God is, man may become. This leads us to question, who is the first God? But Mormonism does not have one. And we are again in this problem of the lack of a beginning of a sequential formation of the set of actual infinites. Now, Jake held that God has been in a constant state of creation and destruction. Constant creation and destruction. Ibn Tamir actually held that there were universes before and will be after. Jake and Ibn Tamir both fought and fight against the idea of God creating everything ex nihilo, that is, out of nothing. Jake argued that if God has a characteristic related to his relationship, then he would not have actualized that aspect of his character until creation. In a way. So there, he laid out the two ideas, and so my argument is, in the Christian view, we have multiple lines of reasoning against this view. Okay. 1. God is a Trinity, meaning that God is one in essence with 3 centers of consciousness. Easier said, God is one being with 3 personhoods. So, even while being alone, right, in one being with nothing else outside of himself, God's character of relationship and love has always been actualized. God could not have created us or anything at all, and still his nature would be exactly the same as it is. He didn't have to make us. Everything that is in his nature would have been fulfilled even without us. Second, Christianity holds that God was timeless, sans, or without time, and in time at the moment of creation. This view, even if we were to grant that God is one in being and one in personhood, such as in Islam, then it is a gross misunderstanding to say that God existed for an infinite amount of time without actualizing his nature. Rather, there was no time before creation. Before creation, God existed alone in a state of no passing of events, no external time, no change, nothing, no passing thoughts, no contemplations. But at the moment of creation, God became animated and now has an external passing of temporal events, meaning God now experiences time in relationship to those events. Take the week of creation. There was a time when God created the heavens and the earth, right? Carried everything. Then imagine you're in day 7 and he is currently resting. He can look forward to his time of coming to earth in the incarnation as one of the humans he just created a couple days ago. So in that first week, we see past, which is creation, present, which is rest, and future, which is incarnation. That is all time is that relationship to those temporal events that happened, is happening, and will happen. With these two views, we can see that With these two views, we can see the Christian God is ontologically greater than the Islamic God, as our God does not need us or anything for that matter. But in Islam, you only have 2 options. 1, God was destined to create us so that he could be in relationship, meaning that God had no choice but was being forced to create us. Or 2, that God has always been creating so that things are not co-eternal, but infinite adjacent, right? He's always been creating. I think either way, we see that the God of Islam, is ontologically lesser than the Christian God, because the Christian God does not need anything else. The Islamic God needs creation to be with him, to actualize his character. For those of you who don't know who Saint Anselm of Canterbury is, he's the one who came up with the ontological argument for God, that God is the greatest conceivable being in which nothing can be conceived of that is greater. And if you could conceive of something that is greater, it would have to be God. So, you tell me, which is greater? The God who does not need anyone or anything outside of himself, but wants to have that relationship with us? Or the God who has no option but to create? I'll wait for your answer.